In this video, we will talk about RStudio projects or R projects. But before that, let's create a new R project. First, open up RStudio, go to File, New Project, create the project in a new directory. Click on New Project. Let's call this project directory Test and create it on my desktop. Open a new session and create that project. A new RStudio session will pop up called Test, and in my example, it is on my desktop in a directory called Test, and the R project file is also called Test. Notice now that there are two RStudio sessions ongoing, one from the previous lectures and another from this new test project. So what are RStudio projects? RStudio projects help us organize our work into separate R sessions. This means that each project has its own workspace or working directory. You can think of workspaces to be like tables in an office. When you enter your office building, how do you know which table is yours? In Singapore, we have this interesting cultural practice where people will leave small packets of tissue on tables to mark their spot or to reserve a table. For example, during lunchtime in a crowded hawker center, if you manage to find a table, you will put a small packet of tissue on the table, go to buy your food, and come back to the same table. There's this unspoken rule that you do not claim a table if it has a packet of tissue on it. Likewise, the R project file acts like a tissue paper telling R that this is my workspace, this is my working directory. For example, you can try to type the function getWD or get working directory in the console of the new project we just created. This would return the absolute path to the working directory of the project. In the console of the new R project you just created, type get working directory. Don't forget the brackets. In my case, I created the project on my desktop, so this is the absolute path to the working directory. On a Mac, you will also notice that this is shown on the window header. If you happen to have the R session from our previous video open, you can try typing getWD as well. You will notice that the working directory is different for this R session. When using RStudio projects, there are some best practices to take note of. Firstly, it is to use relative paths in your script, for instance, based on the location of the R project file. By using RStudio projects, you don't have to write out the initial path. This is because the R project file tells R where the workspace is. Instead, you can use relative paths. This also allows the same script to work across different computers. For example, in this first line of code, this is the absolute path to the ozone data that can be found in our course materials. However, each of our computers are different. We have different usernames, different home directories. So if this is written in the code, if I share my script with you, it will not work on your computer. On the other hand, if we use this second line of code, it is called a relative path, relative to the location of the R project file. And this code would work on my computer and your computer. The second best practice to note is to try to keep all project items in the working directory. This will help to reduce dependencies in the code. Like what we did before, open up the course R project file and let's try to read in the ozone data. In the console, type out read.csv and type out the absolute path to the ozone data. Don't forget to have an open bracket and open quotation marks and to close it off as well. If you're not sure what the absolute path is, you can type getWD or get working directory to find out the absolute path to your working directory. Hit enter. What you notice is that R reads and outputs the ozone data that can be found in that folder. Alternatively, we can also use the relative path. This is the relative path from our working directory. I hit enter and you notice that we have the same output. To reiterate what I just said, it is always best practice to use relative paths. Let's copy this code and paste it in a new code chunk in the new R notebook we created earlier. Hit Command Enter on a Mac or Control Enter on a PC, and you'll be able to see the same 4 columns of ozone-related data. One important thing to note is that sometimes typing getWD from a code chunk within an R notebook, it may be different from the output of getWD from the console. In this case, we type getWD in the code chunk, we get this. And if we type getWD in the console, it is the same. This is because the R notebook that we just created and saved, test.rmd, is in the same directory as the R project file. The thing about R notebooks is that they also have that special property of acting like tissue paper, meaning that they indicate to R that their location is the working directory. So, if your R notebook is in a subfolder, for example, our course materials, the R notebooks for the notes are in the subfolder notes. This means that for code written within these notebooks, the working directory is this subfolder notes. For example, let's open the R notebook for week 1. We can just create a new code chunk and type getWD. Hit Command Enter or Control Enter, and you will notice that the working directory is in that subfolder. On the other hand, in the console, it is always where the R project file is located. So this is important to note. When you're working with R notebooks, which is what we're doing in this course, the location of these R notebooks are important when determining file paths. For example, we can try and read the ozone data using the same code, and this would fail because that's the wrong file path. Because we are in the subfolder, we need to go back to the parent folder, then go into the data folder to get the ozone data. To go back to the parent folder, add 2 dots and a /. Alright, that's it for this video. You might want to undo all the changes you made in this notebook and also delete the test project that we created. I'll see you in the next video.